Ladies and gentlemen, if you're not all aware by now, the second half of version 2.5 in Wuthering Waves has arrived, and there's probably plenty of people that forgotten that the patch is even going on because of the, let's just be honest here, kind of lack of content in it, but the rerun is here. And what I wanted to do today was actually start breaking down when it comes to this unit in particular, what her pull value is, what kind of team compositions you can actually run on her, and just some tips and tricks when it comes to her kit and her building, as well as her weapons, just so that you can determine whether or not she's actually worth it. Because let's just be honest here, you've got quite a bit of company coming in the next patch, and so spending right now is a bit of a ballsy endeavor. So with that, why don't we go ahead, get it right underway, and just start with Cantarella's kit breakdown. So when it comes to this unit, she blends together quite a few roles into a bit of a hybrid sub DPS character. If you just take a look at her combat roles, you'll see that she kind of almost does everything. She's got support and healing, concerto efficiency, which is kind of true. She does basic attack damage, has coordinated attacks, and then that resonance skill and havoc damage amplification. That's just what she does at a baseline. Let's just get into some of the intricacies of her kit and some of the personal problems that I have with her and how they kind of bleed into her gameplay. So when it comes to Cantarella, this is actually the build that I have over here. You can see that she is pretty much invested in most places, but is missing, a couple of levels here and there. The focus of Cantarella when it comes to her kit is using this one attack in her Forte circuit. Don't worry, it's long for a reason. There's not really a good reason, it's just long. The attack that she aims to do in every single rotation is this one called Perception Drain. And basically her entire kit is built around leveraging all these different resources called like Shiver and like Mirage, all of that, to actually be able to cast this attack. And the reason why this attack is so important is because Perception Drain, as you can see over here, is kind of the most damaging attack in Cantarella's kit. That's a pretty wild motion value of around 1,300% just put onto her Forte circuit, and also on a relatively short cooldown of 18 seconds. And so the way that this attack works is essentially you're going to be able to build up this resource called Shiver every single time you spend Trance. She has a lot of different ways to actually gain this Trance. She's got her intro skill, she's got the third hit of her basic attack, she's got her resonance skill, and then her liberation, with her liberation granting the most overall points, and she's able to hold a cap of 5. The idea is that her baseline abilities actually aren't really that significant at all. You can see over here, like, her basic attack is only like 3 attacks, not anything too special, but then a transition move where she uses her heavy attack to actually be able to spend the trance, build up the Shiver, and then actually use her Forte circuit move. So the idea is that she builds up those 5 points using all of these abilities that you're looking at over here, and then once she is at a level of trance that she feels like using, she just simply uses a heavy attack called Delusive Dive to enter a state called Mirage. And then while she's in Mirage, she gains access to a couple of special abilities. The first one being her resonance skill, which is at a baseline very, very, very basic, transforms into a different one that's considered an echo skill, and also inflicts this debuff called Hazy Dream that basically slows down the enemies. And if Cantarella hits them again, they get hit with like a mini jolt of like damage. It's not too crazy, but scales pretty well with sequence nodes. And her resonance skill can also be enhanced again when she has those 3 points of Shiver, which are basically created by basic attacking during Mirage, and then using these attacks called Phantom Sting. Each time she uses Phantom Sting, she consumes 1 trance, generates 1 Shiver, and then when she's at 3 Shiver, right, she's able to use her enhanced resonance skill, Perception Drain, deal all that damage. Every single time that she uses Phantom Sting, or every time she uses Perception Drain, she actually will start healing the team. And while the healing isn't that great, you can see over here, it does build up over time, and she has many instances of it. And so that does make her a pretty much fulfilling sustain role on the team. You don't need a Shorekeeper, you don't need the Verena, you don't need all these other units. Cantarella is in a way a bit of a replacement for those. So that's how like her baseline kit works. Now let's talk about just kind of like the last part, which is her liberation. We mentioned that it creates 3 trance. What it also does is it counts as an echo skill as well, and it also triggers coordinated attacks, which I'm going to be honest here. The coordinated attack part of her kit doesn't matter too much. Her liberation is kind of only there to create and generate trance because it does almost no damage. Almost none at all. This is 13.52% times 21. And then the nuke itself is only like 350% when literally Perception Drain is almost quadruple that on her Forte circuit. So Perception Drain counts as an echo skill. This Enhanced Flickering Reverie elemental skill counts as an echo skill. And then her Liberation also counts as one, too. So that gives her about 4 total. And that means that she does a lot of fueling for a character like Frolova. And that's kind of why she's her best in slot teammate, because of all those echo skills that she's providing. So kind of like moving forward a bit now, let's just take a look at her inherents. She just gains a healing bonus. And then she just gains a stacking havoc damage bonus whenever she has her echo skill. So that's kind of just like that. That's how the character works. She's actually very easy to use in practice, but she does have a little bit of clunk in her trunk when it comes to actually making your kit work. So now let's go ahead. Let's get on into our gameplay demo and talk a bit about how you're typically going to use her in your team rotations. And the thing is, she's kind of simple. But first, we got to go ahead and actually gear her. And I'm just going to be sticking her on this set for now. All right, and we're also going to be just sliding her on String Master, but we will be doing some testing on her weapon later. We'll be pulling that. Don't worry. All right, so that's going to be our kit overview. Now let's talk a little bit about Cantarella's actual gameplay. And the TOA is just going to be a great time to actually show that off. And we'll be making sure not to actually use the Havoc team. One thing that's a bit of an issue with the Havoc team is that it's kind of visually cluttered when you're playing all 3 of them at once. And so you literally can't really see what's actually going on. So I mentioned before that Cantarella actually has, and this is one thing that I missed from her kit overview, she actually has Havoc damage amplification, as well as Resonant skill damage amplification on her outro skill. Gentle Tentacles. And so one way that you can actually use her, funnily enough, is kind of as like a sub DPS buffer for a unit like Carlotta. So this is how we're actually going to start off for her demo, because it kind of shows her in her most basic role and will let us demonstrate her rotation pretty seamlessly. So don't actually worry about the fact that this isn't her best in slot team. Let's get it going. So this is going to be short because Cantarella is not actually that complicated. You're simply just going to like build up Concerto on your teammate. And then get ready to naturally, right, intro skill onto Cantarella, do all that fun stuff. You're going to go in, attack, press your skill, and then do 1. You're going to enter Delusive Dive after you get 3 stacks, and then you'll be basically ready to go fully filled out, right, on your trance. And you'll be able to get off your Perception Drain, and, well, assuming that you're not interrupted in the middle of your stuff, you can see how fast she actually ended up gaining her Concerto. And then we can, like, outro skill onto the unit that we're actually trying to do DPS on. That was a little bit tricky. That looked a little bit clunky, right? Due to the fact that, well, the guy was in the air and half of our attacks weren't hitting. So let's try that again on a different stage where it's probably going to be a lot easier to hit all the enemies. And you'll see that the rotation is a couple seconds faster. All right. This is kind of like an AoE base floor. We're now going to use our Liberation. Go on to Cantarella. Attack, skill, get to 3 of our Forte circuit stacks. Then Delusive Dive. Attack 1 time to go down to 2 trance. Generate 3 more. And then just start spamming your skill, basically. And that's kind of like it. That's the unit. And the one thing that I'll say about her playstyle that's a little bit unfortunate, right, is the fact that she does feel a little bit clunky to play, especially when you're not using her with an intro skill. You gotta hold down your heavy attack to actually enter Delusive Dive. And if you like accidentally basic or anything like that, it can be a little bit tricky. But once you get like the rhythm and the flow down for how you're actually playing her, you'll get used to it. But the fact that you gotta hold down the left mouse button to enter that special state and then start spamming basics afterwards, it's kind of like some awkward key presses. The Resonant skill part of her kit I feel is fine, but that initial transformation, I've messed it up a lot of times and end up doing like a jump attack or like a plunge attack instead. and it's kind of annoying. But yeah, just do keep in mind that heavy attack does have to be used. So yeah, that's the gameplay demo. That's typically how you're going to see her, just rotating through in 90% of situations. There's some variations that you'll do in other teams, though, with other units like a Jinsei. And we'll make sure to cover those as well, because Cantarella is a best in slot, or close to a best in slot for that unit as well. Now that we've gone ahead and we have covered her kit demo, let's talk a little bit about her build and her echoes. So one of the most important things about Cantarella is the fact that you need 130% ER on her. If you do not have 130% ER on this character, you will not have your liberation every single rotation. And if you don't have your liberation every rotation, it will basically be impossible for you to have like consistent timings. You'll have to spend extra time doing like random basic attacks or like random things before you're actually able to move on to the next character. Your concerto generation is going to be slowed down significantly. So this is kind of the most important thing ever. And so what that means is that when it comes to her Echo build, you've got a couple of potential best in slots, or really close to best in slots that are competing for it, but some options that are way easier to build than others. And the first Echo set that I actually recommend on Cantarella is none other than Empyrene Anthem, because it by itself gives you a 10% ER increase while also buffing your coordinating attacks and also giving them buffing abilities. This is a bit of a double-edged sword for Cantarella for a couple of reasons. A, the ER is really good and makes it so you only need like 2 substats on your Echoes for Cantarella to be usable, which is awesome. However, Cantarella's coordinated attack damage, as we talked about before, is complete dog shit. It does almost no damage at all. This is basically nothing. And so the buffing, the personal damage buffing portion of Empyrene isn't that great. However, what Empyrene also does is it increases the attack of the active resonator by 20%. Because Cantarella uses her liberation in the middle of her rotation, and before she uses the most damaging attack in her kit, Perception Drain, that means that 20% attack bonus from Empyrene Anthem will be active on her as she's going through the most damaging parts of her rotation. And so that means that Empyrene essentially allows you to personally buff a small bit of Cantarella's damage, actually a good portion of Cantarella's damage, while also retaining that buffing ability for the next character in the team, which is, in all respects, pretty damn good. It's pretty damn powerful. For other options, though, you'll see that from the recommended list over here, you can also go with Midnight Veil instead, alongside the Lorelei Echo, because it also provides a Havoc damage and basic attack damage boost, which is really nice because Havoc and basic attack are Cantarella's main damage types across her rotation. And so when you do have Midnight Veil ready to go, you only get a small 10% Havoc damage buff, but the 4-cost Echo piece passive bonus is really good for Cantarella. You also will be able to buff the next incoming resonator with 15% Havoc damage bonus. You can probably notice Midnight Veil is only really good if you're going to be using Cantarella with a unit like Frolova or maybe like a Danjin or a Havoc Rover. That's why I suggest Empyrene, because it is kind of the most general use case set that doesn't sacrifice too much of her personal damage. But if you are in the mood to sacrifice a good bit of her personal damage, then you can also go with Moonlit Clouds, because this is just going to be a pure buffing set that only gives ER, no personal damage buffs at all. And then this can also be combined with the Impermanence Heron, which gives an additional damage buff of 12% damage to go on top of the 22.5% attack. So if you're looking to just really support one hyper carry unit with Cantarella, you can do this, but her great motion values will suffer from just not having as many damage buffs available. The last thing that I'll say about her build when it comes to Midnight Veil is that you do have to be grinding a lot to make sure that this set is going to work on Cantarella. Because like I mentioned before, you want 130% ER on this unit or you're going to want to not play her. And this set gives no ER. It gives none. The biggest buff that Kuro Games could actually give to Midnight Veil is to turn this from 10% Havoc damage to 10% ER. Because I'm going to be honest, ladies and gentlemen, trying to get double crit on all of your pieces while also getting ER of around 10% on 3 of them is nuts. It's absurd trying to do both of those at once. And it can take you a lot of rerolls, a lot of echo tuning, all of that. And it can be a lot of resources just to build a sub DPS who, once again, ladies and gentlemen, they're not the main damage dealer on the team. A character like this is. So that's a lot of expenditure for like a kind of like a little bit of output. So remember, the main thing that you want to prioritize is 130% ER, because this makes the unit playable. This stuff attack and crit rate just makes her do more damage. But if you don't have this, she kind of actually does not feel playable. So you can kind of see what the bigger priorities are when it comes to this game. Damage, or actually being able to perform their rotation. So yeah, that's why I suggest Empyrine. If you want to upgrade to Midnight Veil, go for it, but it is going to be a little bit difficult. The last thing that I'll say in regards to her Echo build that might be a little bit helpful if you're in the middle of grinding for her is that when it comes to Tacet Fields, there's actually one set in particular at Penitent's End that actually drops both Midnight Veil as well as the coordinated attack set. And so if you've been paying attention, right, you would know that both of these sets are like her best in slots. And so you kind of get like a 2-for-1 over here when it comes to all of this. So yeah, now let's move on to the next topic over here, which is going to be her weapons. And, well, for me to give the most accurate breakdown of what we're going to be talking about over here in this section, I'm going to have to pull Cantarella's weapon. So why don't we go ahead and just do that really fast, so we can give, you know, the most accurate take in this regard. Oh boy, I'm going to regret this, aren't I? I'm going to regret this.
Nope.
Hey, I'm not even mad. I'm not even mad, though. Oh my gosh, I'm not even mad. Wait, music off is better. Just keep giving me variations. Wait, just keep giving me variations.
Nope.
No, that's 2. Okay. I've gotten 1 hit of a variation. I'm allowed to keep going.
Nope. Bruh.
No! Come on. Another variation. Sorry, I'm supposed to be pulling for Cantarella's weapon, but variation happens to be on banner. So that's like boom. Huge. All right, we got 2 R5 variations now. No Cantarella weapon. Sorry, quick second. Let me go consult my financial advisor real fast. Financial advisor is sweating right now. Yeah, he already actually quit. I'm pretending to be the financial advisor. He actually quit at the start of the year. When 2.0 launched, he knew he was fucked, so he just kind of stopped trying. You know what I mean? All right. So, after consulting my financial advisor, it looks like we're in a better spot to pull this jellyfish, so let's keep on going. And like I've naturally been talking about, right? Variation is a very good pull. This is one of the best weapon banners in the history of the game, and so, naturally, right, I know Augusta and Yuno are coming out, but if you do actually want one of these weapons, this is one of the best opportunities ever to actually pull on one, because you might get, well, the weapon I've been talking about, Variation, which is the best 4-star in the game. So, let's just keep going. Let's pray for another copy or just the weapon.
Damn, son, where'd you find this?
This is like the best fucking day ever. If you guys haven't noticed before on my channel, there's a video where I basically pulled Rosia's weapon trying to go for variation. And I haven't gotten Cantarella's weapon yet, and I've gotten 4 copies of variation. This is awesome. This is great.
Nope.
Surely I won't get another one. Yeah, I won't. All right. Like, I have to be at pity by now. I have to be. I'm pretty sure I pulled like 400 times. This is getting illegal. There we go. Okay. All right. The intermission is over. We now have Cantarella's weapon, ladies and gentlemen. Whispers of Sirens. Oh, I didn't know I didn't know that the weapon had jiggle physics too. I had no idea that the weapon had jiggle physics as well. That's crazy. Anyways, so let's just go ahead and get that one leveled up real fast. All right. After we've gone on our bizarre adventure, now let's start talking about some of our weapon options. So naturally, the first one on deck is going to be Whispers of Sirens. And as you can see, this weapon effect is actually massive in terms of length, but it's pretty simple with how it works. It gives an attack buff, and then whenever you use an echo skill, after using an intro skill or basic attack, which is basically Cantarella's kit as a whole, she basically gains 2 stacks. 1 stack each time she does it, 2 stacks max. With 1 stack, she gains a 40% basic attack damage bonus, which is her main damage type, which is great. And then with 2 stacks, she ignores 12% of the enemy's havoc resistance. This is a very DPS focused piece. You can see that it gives a lot of crit damage as well. And it's basically just all around focusing on Cantarella's personal damage. With this weapon, her personal damage on her teams is actually quite high. and significantly higher than it is compared to some other weapons, but it does come with some drawbacks, mainly being that this weapon is kind of hard to build around because of the fact that it gives all this mass amount of critical damage and none of the critical rate, and you need critical rate to actually deal critical damage in the first place. That means that she actually has some other options as well on the roster that do give her a bit of a bonus, right? String Master is probably the best overall piece to use if you don't have her signature, due to the fact that it kind of gives the opposite critical stat, gives you a massive 36% crit rate boost, and then when you deal resident skill damage, you gain some increases to attack. Cantarella kind of has like questionable uptime on this because she only deals resonance skill damage with like one part of her kit at the start of her rotation, and you're not going to get a lot of great runtime on the the attack increasing effect of this ability, and you're also really not going to maintain its uptime off field either. It's mainly for the great attribute damage bonus over here, and then the great 36% crit stat stick. This makes her way easier to build on the Echo side. You run like a crit damage forecast, you miss a crit rate roll on one of your pieces, and you'll still be at like 80%. And that's one of the big benefits of this over here. If you have Frolova, well, think about it this way. If you have Frolova's weapon, you're never going to use Frolova's weapon on Cantarella, even if Echo skill damage might be a decent stat on her, because if you have Frolova's weapon, you're going to use it on Frolova, who's going to be on Cantarella's team. And so because of that, you're never like, sure, you could think about using Frolova's weapon on Cantarella. It's just, in practical cases, it'll never happen. But it does give you, like, a decent bit of bonuses as well, right? Because Cantarella does actually deal Echo skill damage across her kit. It is something that occurs. And you will be able to get this 8% defense ignore, but her signature is kind of just... her signature is just kind of better, right? Because it gives resistance ignore and then that 40% basic attack damage boost, while this focuses on resonance skill. One of the other options that you can actually go for is Luminous Hymn, but this thing is basically going to have no effect unless you have a Spectro Frazzle applicator on your team like Spectro Rover or Phoebe. And if you do, then you will get a nice little basic attack damage boost that can, kind of stack up over time, which would be nice for Cantarella, but do keep in mind, this is one of the most specific effect lock signatures in the game, and it's going to be really hard to actually make it work on her. And so those are going to be the main suggestions that I do have. When it comes to 4-star options, you can always go for like the BP weapon augment, or in like really desperate cases, use like a fusion accretion, because this also does give like resonance energy throughout her rotation, which is, somewhat useful for Cantarella given how high her ER requirements are. So we might be able to loosen on those for a little bit as well. Another option that you can actually go for when it comes to Cantarella's weapons is none other than the signature standard one. And Cosmic Ripple, surprisingly enough, is not actually bad on Cantarella. It's actually quite decent because this weapon entirely focuses on basic attack damage and then also provides ER and is kind of just like a stat stick, right? And Cantarella, like we've been saying this entire time, does mainly basic attack damage, and she needs ER. And so this is another very, very good actual option for her for like functionality. And if you're thinking about using 4-star weapons, I would suggest you actually just pull a copy of this instead, and she'll be perfectly good to use. She simply won't deal as much damage lacking the critical stats, but it provides pretty much everything else that she wants in her kit, which is good, right? It's great. So that's going to be her weapon. That's going to be all the discussion over there. Now let's talk about the last part of Cantarella's kit before getting into the actual gameplay and then demonstrating some of the teams. Let's get right on into her sequence notes. And this is where stuff can get a little bit interesting because I feel like Cantarella's sequence notes do kind of transform her as a character. So let's kind of talk about them. All right. Her first node is basically just going to increase that passive trance that she has, and it's also going to increase the damage multiplier of a lot of attacks in her kit, and then give her interruption resistance. You can see that this is very much a damage and personal damage oriented upgrade. Just damage buffs everywhere, and then she gains more resources that she uses to do Phantom Sig attacks, which deal damage. Second is, her Liberation is now going to send the target into the Hazy Dream. And then the damage multiplier of Jolt is increased by 245%. This basically turns her into a main DPS and greatly amplifies like all of the personal damage that she's dealing across her rotation. This is because of A, how Hazy Dream works. So essentially, Hazy Dream, right, like we mentioned, is a status effect that basically sees them for a very long time, and if Cantarella wakes them up with an attack, she deals jolt damage. Her S2 takes this 184, and it actually goes up to basically 200%, and then multiplies, adds 200 something percent multiplier onto that. The end result is that this ends up dealing like almost 500% damage, close to that, which is crazy because she could apply this at her S2. She applies this 3 times in her rotation, 3 times. A 245% multiplier on this, and she applies it 3 times in her rotation. That is a lot of damage. And so what her S2 essentially is that now she's playable as a main DPS. Maybe you put her on Havoc Eclipse instead and kind of, get a Sanhua or something like that to actually provide her an outro skill at this point. But that's just something to keep in mind. You're basically turning her into a main DPS with this one, and you're seeing that she's not really leaning too much into like the supporting side, not really leaning too much into like the buffing side either with this one. You can compare this with other S2s in the game on other sub DPS units, and you can see, kind of looking at a Lupa, kind of looking at a Chakota, these S2s are way more focused on buffing the team. So that's what I meant by Cantarella sequence nodes being a little bit different relative to some of the other characters that have been released. Now let's keep going. All right, the damage multiplier of Resonance Liberation on S3 is increased by 370%. You can probably see what I'm talking about now. After casting her Liberation, she's going to go straight on into Mirage. And casting her Liberation Flowing Suffocation does not activate the Mirage state again if she's already in it. So I guess this is the thing. This line in Cantarella's kit is almost telling me that the devs know her kit is clunky as well. Because why would they add in something that basically just does the heavy attack for you in the rotation? I would be all on board for this just being removed and then being added to her baseline kit. Because at this point, it's like, what is this even for? When like her transformation just requires you to do a heavy attack and cost nothing. The devs know her kit is clunky too. Otherwise, why the hell would this even be in here? And of course, that's attached to a massive multiplier boost on her Liberation. All right, so this is her 1 support node. When in Mirage, her healing bonus is increased by 25%. Woohoo! And now we got her S5. She increases the number of Dreamweavers that Cantarella summons through her Liberation by 5. This is quite possibly the worst S5 in the game. And the reason why I'm saying that is quite simple. You're summoning 5 more of these. This goes from a 21 to a 26. Congratulations. You will be dealing 14.54% damage 5 more times. That is for a copy for up to 180 pulls. This might be the worst upgrade I've ever seen in the history of the game. But that's the thing. Most S5, like S4s and S5s are typically not that great. And so it does make sense that like this one is this bad. But if you don't know how little Cantarella's coordinated attacks do, you might actually have thought this was decent. But increasing her number of coordinated attacks is completely pointless because they don't do any damage. All right, now for her S6. This is kind of the big one. She's going to increase the multiplier of her Forte Enhanced basic attacks by 80%, and then she's going to gain 30% defense ignore after using her Liberation. And then for the first 1.2 seconds of Hazy Dream, when the target takes an instance of damage that does not inflict Hazy Dream, Jolt will not be triggered. And so I think this basically just means that A, she's guaranteed more CC while she's on fielding, and this will essentially make it so that she can chain stun an enemy for around 3.6 seconds during the most damaging parts of her rotation, which I think is mostly like a hologram thing, or maybe it's for like a TOA thing. Basically, more reliable CC while slightly delaying your damage a little bit, but also keep in mind she's dealing a lot more damage anyways with all this defense ignore. So yeah, those are her sequence nodes, and as you can probably imagine, with only 1 supporting one in her kit, and the rest of them pretty much entirely focused on her personal damage. That's why I'm saying that her role does significantly change across her teams. She actually becomes one of the best solo units in the game, in my opinion, because, well, she kind of loses the ability to need a team anymore, because she's got built-in healing, she's got all of this uninterrupted CC that she's going to be chaining together, and her damage just kind of skyrockets through the roof as you get more and more of her copies. So that's going to be your sequence nodes. You clearly say I don't have any, but do keep that in mind. You are kind of going in for the long haul with this one, and you won't really be supporting other teams by getting more copies of her. So with that out of the way, now let's get into a demonstration of how she's going to operate in the TOA, working with some of her best teams. And of course, the first one that we're going to have to show off is none other than the Havoc team. And so I don't want to necessarily do it in this version of the TOA because the Havoc team is incredibly shielded over here and the damage is going to look a little bit ridiculous. Let's just go ahead and plop ourselves over into the overdrive zone, take on this floor over here, where there is going to be a bit of a Havoc resistance damage boost, but it'll actually let us have like some longer fights and, you know, get a little bit more, I don't know, content out of it. So yeah, this is going to be the Frolova, Rosia, and Cantarella team. All of them with their signatures and kind of like ready to go, just kind of like showing off the full power of this team. Let's give it a spin. So Frolova always starts off the rotation in this team, and then Cantarella is the third character. You go Frolova to Rosia to Cantarella to back to Frolova. I always make sure to incorporate some cancels into the kit to make Frolova's first rotation as fast as possible. We're gonna use her liberation, get all of that going, and then go over to Rosia. We're going to get interrupted, probably, because this character is one of the worst in the game. But she's good on the Havoc team. Okay, we made it out safe on Rosia. We're going to Echo skill, and then go over to Cantarella. Boom. And then enter Delusive Dive after using our skill. And then just start, you know, using all of our Echo skills. And you can see over here, pretty fast, what ended up happening. The team does rotate very, very, very quick after you've gotten kind of like used to their playstyle. Because you do some sort of stuff that many might consider a little bit atypical in a team's rotation, right? One other thing that Cantarella can do is that she's kind of mobile. She can try to chase down the enemies. While she's in her Delusive Dive state. And as you can notice, this is performing quite well in the overdrive zone. And that should finish it off. Very easy to play team. Quite strong in pretty much all the content in the game. This team is actually better in Whimpering Waste than it is in the TOA because you got way more AoE. But that's kind of just how it's going to work for this one. Now, let's go ahead and show what this team looks like, or show what Cantarella looks like in a bit of a different environment, right? Where you're actually using her as a Jinxie support. And this is the thing. That's kind of the only other team that's worth showing off in the game. Because Cantarella is basically just tied to these two characters. If you're not using Cantarella with either of these DPS options, she's basically just going to be worse than every other unit in the game. And there's kind of no way out of it. That's kind of the unfortunate part of how she works, is that her team options are incredibly constrained relative to other units on the roster. Some people are saying, oh, why don't you go ahead and use her with Carlotta? You can do that. You can use Cantarella with Carlotta, but she is straight up worse than Jeja. She's like at least 20+% worse with Jeja. And that's the thing, right? I've already said it. These are the two units where she could be considered a best in slot. And for every other team, she's worse than other options. Cantarella can be used with any resonance skill damage dealer, but she's not going to be a best in slot. And sure, it'll definitely clear the content. She can be very flexible. But there's pretty much always going to be a better option unless you're using one of these two. So let's go ahead and show what it looks like when you are using a character like a, well, let's just be honest here, a Jinxie to get all of this done. And we're going to be doing this with kind of like one of the more budget-friendly teams in the game, using a Verita instead with our Jancy. Okay, why does she have a Lustrous Razor on? Okay, that's a little bit sus. So yeah, this is going to be the Jinxie over here. You're seeing over here, I don't have a lot of ER, and that's where I'm going to have some issues. Because Jeja is a lot better when your Jinxie doesn't have that much ER, because Jeja gives ER in her kit. And so you're going to see some of the suffering that I'm going to have to go through because of this kind of like issue that I have. But that's kind of just part and parcel of playing Cantarella. So let's get this underway. All right, so for this team over here, you just always start off your Jinxie rotation by A, getting into her attack over here, using this hitting the big boom, and then going over the Cantarella, and then just casting her Liberation, right? Then you're actually going to go over onto Verena, do her basic attack combo, and then back to Jinsei. You'll notice that Cantarella's outro skill was not used, but Cantarella's coordinated attacks are coming out. So that's great. We got our intro skill, right? And now we're just going to Perception Drain, and then go back to Jinsei. Right as her Incandescence comes off cooldown. And then boom, go back. Hit that big crit, and then go back to Cantarella. Cast her Liberation. Then go back to Verena. And you're noticing, right? As I'm rotating throughout this, everything is like right perfectly on cooldown. And this is where our first big issue occurs. Because I'm not using Jeja and I don't have the ER, my Liberation is not available yet. And so right now, I kind of just got to do some attacks to fully fill up Cantarella, right? Or to fully fill up the Forte circuit so that I can go to Cantarella. And so I do face a tiny bit of a like delay in my rotation because of that one thing alone. But as you can probably tell, right? It's not that huge of a deal. I lose like a couple of seconds. But that's the one disadvantage that Cantarella actually has compared to those Rosia teams. Oh, yeah, you see. Okay, we're just taking a while to finish it off, but that's essentially what it is. That is how you're going to be using Cantarella with your Jancy, and that's where her weakness is relative to a Jeja. On that, like, third rotation, when you're trying to do that Jinsei Liberation to build up her Concerto to go back to Cantarella, when you don't have that ER and you don't have that Jeja passive, you spend a lot longer just doing those random basic attacks, right? To get those last couple of attacks in to fill it up. So yeah, that is the Cantarella demonstration, right? Those are the two main ways that you're going to be using her and actually have her be a best in slot. And if you're just looking to use her with like Carlotta or other resident skill damage dealers, I mean, you'll just use the same rotation as in the Frolova team, right? And then give the outro skill to the character. Go Shorekeeper to Cantarella and then your DPS. And I think we demonstrated that rotation plenty of times. Now, since we talked about that and we've gone here, let's now do the last kind of demo. And that's going to be in Whimpering Waste. And let's be honest about one thing in Whimpering Waste. Cantarella is, without a doubt, one of the best Whimpering Waste characters. And the reason why she's the best Whimpering Waste character right now, or really the best Whimpering Waste sub DPS, is because she is paired with Frolova, who is the best Whimpering Waste DPS. And so that's kind of just what it is. Frolova is absolutely broken in this game mode. She's illegal, and Cantarella is Frolova's best teammate. The end result is that the scores this team will be getting will be absolutely disgusting. And I'll just show you all what it looks like when you're simply using regular purple tokens. All right, so my team is already ready to go up here. It used the gold token when I got around 4.5k. I was using a gold token. Let's see what it looks like when I just replace it with the general attribute damage purple token that is available every single reset, and just show you all what the potential of this team is when all the stars are aligning. Let's get right on into it. Okay, all right. All right, so you're seeing over here, off to a pretty strong start right now. We're going to try to get Rosia's Liberation over here. A little bit of a delay, because on this side, you start off at 0 energy, but because I kind of like work to get Rosia's, I easily have Cantarella's, right? And I'm just kind of doing some additional damage over here to try to finish off this wave. Okay, I'm griefing. Yeah, we missed a crit, and that's why Whimpering Race is kind of annoying, is when you have like that one mob left over and you don't want to waste your AoE abilities. Let's just see if we get better luck this time. Here we go. There, that is a lot better. That is a lot better. Okay, come on. Surely we're going to be able to... You're noticing, right, how some slight variations have made this clear seem so much better. Way better. And boom. All right. Every single rotation that this team does more damage than the last one because of how Frolova's mechanics kind of work. Every time a teammate uses her Echo skill while her Liberation is active, she basically gains a massive crit damage buff and a multiplier buff on her attacks. And as, you know, in Whimpering Waste, in a game mode where it's kind of like focused around, well, long fights where you kill as many as possible, you can see that the end results are a little bit nutty. So yeah, this is all with the purple token, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, it's not really too much to say at this point, right? With the purple token, we're hitting close to around 4K. $3.96K with the purple token with this team. Yeah, that's only 500 points below the gold token. That's kind of high. And this is the thing. If you use any other team in the game, let's just say I were to use this team without a gold token dedicated for the fusion team, I would get a score of maybe like 2 point something. This team is literally just scoring thousands of points above others because of how well it works together and how that after sound mechanic that I was talking about, the stacking crit rate, all of that, how all of it actually bundles up. And with Cantarella being the main way for Frolova to stack her aftersound, well, that's why I think that all three of these units are tier 0 in Whimpering Waste. Because the HP inflation in that game mode, while an unfortunate part, has undeniably shown the incredible strength of how this kit is designed. And so, yeah, that's that one. So, I would say at this point, when it comes to Cantarella and her overall pull value, we've seen her build, we've seen her sequence nodes, we've seen all of that. She's a very interesting unit, right? I think she's a unit that, for a lot of people, can scratch a couple of itches. Because A, she's very flexible, right? She does the healing, she does the damage as well, and she also has the CC. A lot of things combined together. And then as you start getting more of her sequence nodes, she basically becomes like a solo unit that's capable of dealing a lot of damage, capable of CCing for a very long time, and then also even has like some additional utility boosts, right? She has a role with some of the best DPS characters in the game. She currently exists on the best Whimpering Waste team in the game, and then she also has, you know, a minor bit of use cases when she is, you know, kind of used with Jinxie over here. I will say though, it's like, for a new player, I can say that A, she might be nice because she can like free up the Shorekeeper, because that Havoc team that we just looked at, right, does not actually use a Shorekeeper at all. You can go ahead and go for her because of that alone, and then like fill out the Havoc team, have Shorekeeper free to be used anywhere else. But if you are a new player that's just looking to pull her, I would say, well, if you do have a team that she can be used with, like a Carlotta, maybe go for it. But do keep in mind that there's always going to be an upgrade option. And if you're looking for Cantarella to kind of be like this jack of all trades, usable everywhere, you can consider that. That's definitely an option and a choice. But you're never really going to have a true best in slot unless you are planning to actually go for this one. Or you have a Jinxie with a fair bit of ER. And when you consider the weaknesses of other characters as well, who Cantarella might be working with, then she might not be the best pick overall, because there's always going to be a better option than her in most teams. And so when it comes to being a must pull, and when it comes to knowing that Augusta and Yuno are coming out, if you have Frolova, I would say yes, go for Cantarella. If you have Jinsey and you don't have a Jeja, and you never plan on pulling Jeja, and you never plan on pulling Carlotta, which is probably a very low percentage of people, then go for Cantarella. But the thing is, if you have a Jinsey and you have a Carlotta, then just pull Jeja. If you have a Jinsey, but then no Carlotta, it's like, you probably still want Jeja anyways, because Carlotta is kind of like, I think some would say, a little bit more of like a usable character than Frolova. Carlotta's a lot more affordable to use as well. And I mean, I'm just gonna be honest over here, it doesn't require kind of like the more like, doesn't have like as much sort of like synergy with like echo skills and all of that Frolova has going on. It's a little bit rough. And I would say Cantarella isn't super high on my priority list, but you can get a lot of use out of her if you're willing to have more subpar performance across a majority of the teams that you're going to be using her on. And when you do have the couple of teams where she does excel and is really good, she's incredible. But there's just not that many of those teams in the game, and she doesn't feel as flexible as, say, other units, like maybe a Brandt. And he's kind of like the main competitor with her, because he's also running on the banner as well. I would say Brandt is actually a little bit higher value. But that's just my opinion. So yeah, that'll be that for the meta breakdown. That'll be that for the meta analysis. I know there's a little bit of spitballing here and there when it comes to like her use cases, but I would just have to say, as somebody that owns every single character in the game, she's not one that I'm using very often on my own free will, unless it's with a unit like her. So yeah, that'll be that, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know what you all think. Peace.